Today, we're exploring Rafael Jumbolo's insights on managing AWS workloads, sharing the 9 things he wishes he knew when he started. Kaka cell phone, let's dive into your journey. What was the most impactful lesson from Rafael's article?
For me, it's Rafael's point on studying deeply. He emphasizes how focusing on the AWS services your company uses most can lead to huge time savings and efficiencies. If you know these services inside out, it can make debugging and managing workloads much quicker.
That's a great takeaway. I love how Rafael highlights something like database snapshots, something that can save hours of work. Speaking of efficiency, he also stresses planning for failure. How do you approach this in your own work?
Absolutely, planning for failure is essential. Rafael's advice on having backup snapshots, especially for large changes, is invaluable. When managing infrastructure, you need to account for worst-case scenarios, and if something fails, you want to minimize downtime. I do the same. Before making any big changes, I always take the time to back things up.
That's so important. Rafael also talks about the blue/green deployment technique for testing big changes. It's a clever approach, but it must be carefully implemented. What do you think about it?
It's an awesome technique. Essentially, you're deploying your new changes in parallel to the old ones, with no disruption. If the new version works as expected, you can just switch over. But as Rafael points out, there are risks, especially with non-backward compatible changes. It's critical to think through the consequences before testing on production, and that's why we often have a staging environment to ensure things go smoothly first.
Right, testing is crucial. Moving on to the next point, Rafael also suggests using managed services wherever possible. This is a time saver for sure. In your experience, how do managed services help reduce operational overhead?
Managed services, like AWS RDS, are game changers. They take care of the heavy lifting like patching, updates, and backups, freeing up your team to focus on building new features rather than worrying about maintenance. For companies just starting out or bootstrapping, it's essential to minimize operational complexity and focus on customer value.
Totally agree. Moving on, Rafael emphasizes the importance of following a 2-tier architecture, dividing networks into public and private tiers. Can you explain how this concept benefits AWS workloads?
Definitely. The 2-tier architecture is all about security and reducing the attack surface. By placing critical resources, like databases, in a private tier and limiting public-facing resources to things like load balancers, you minimize exposure to threats. The Bastion host adds another layer of security, acting as a controlled access point to the private tier.
Great explanation. Moving forward, Rafael stresses the importance of using a naming convention in AWS. It may sound basic, but it's a game changer as infrastructure grows. How do you approach naming resources?
Naming conventions are so crucial. When you have dozens or hundreds of resources in your AWS account, chaos can quickly set in without a system in place. I follow something similar to Rafael's approach, using clear, descriptive names like resource name date to ensure resources are easy to locate. It's not glamorous, but it saves tons of time in the long run, especially when troubleshooting.
Exactly. Finally, Rafael talks about automating as much as possible and setting alarms when automation isn't feasible. What's your approach to automation in AWS?
Automation is the key to scaling effectively. Services like auto-scaling and RDS storage auto-scaling are critical in responding to changing demands. For anything that can't be automated yet, like certain manual checks or unforeseen issues, setting up alarms in CloudWatch is essential. I love that Rafael emphasizes this balance between automation and monitoring. Both are necessary to ensure everything runs smoothly.
Absolutely. So, to wrap up, there's so much valuable advice from Rafael in this article. If you're managing AWS workloads, these lessons could save you a ton of time and energy. Thanks for joining me today, Kaka Cell Phone, and sharing your insights.
It's been a pleasure. There's always more to learn about AWS, but these foundational lessons are crucial for anyone working in cloud infrastructure. Thanks for having me.